Well, let's move to the debates on the cases on breaches of human rights, democracy and rule of law. I suppose that we will limit ourselves within 1 hour maximum. And the first item on our agenda is Laos, the case of Sombath Somphone. Let's start from the floor given to 6 authors of the resolution. And now, as the first, will take the floor Mr. Romeva i Rueda. 1 minute and a half.
Indeed, on the 15th December 2012, Sombath Somphone became victim of an enforced disappearance according to automatic camera footage, just after being stopped by police officers in Tedewa checkpoint in the Sisatanak district of Vientiane. Sombath Somphone is widely appreciated and well known for his extensive work in the fields of sustainable and fair development and access to land. As part of the Lao National Organizing Committee, was one of the partners in the organizing in Vientiane of the 9th Asia-Europe People's Forum. During this forum, farmers invited by him brought to the attention of participants the situation of Lao farmers being deprived of their land for the building of mega projects, some of them co-financed by international finance institutions, being European, some of them. Many of us are deeply concerned about the whereabouts and safety of Sombath Somphone. The length and the lack of transparency of the investigation is also a major problem. Thus, we urge Lao authorities to inform Sombath Somphone's family about the progress of the investigations and call on the governments to ensure that all steps are being taken to locate, rescue and return him safely to his family as soon as possible. And I appeal to the government of Laos and the other Asian member states to underline publicly the legality and the legitimacy of the work for sustainable development and social justice in order to counter intimidation efforts and forced disappearances of activists. And by the way, finally, Laos must ratify the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Mitro Repo, 2 minutes.
Arvoisa puhemies, parlamentti esittää syystäkin syvän huolensa.
Thank you very much. The European Parliament is legitimately concerned about the disappearance of Sombath Somphone. According to available information, it would seem that the Lao police force is involved, and in fact they're preventing investigation into the matter. The fact of the matter is that the Laotian authorities must do everything they possibly can to clear this up and to prevent any kind of disappearance of this type. This kind of abduction is a breach of human rights and of fundamental rights. Now, of course, this is a source of a very serious concern to the family, but also to all those who know the man. What is particularly worrying are the human rights violations perpetrated by the authorities. They are a brake on the development of Lao society and have generated concern in the international community. The EEA, the European External Action Service, should get in touch with the Lao authorities. They should be encouraged to ratify the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. The cases such as these must stop. The Lao government has an obligation to respect the freedom of opinion and freedom of expression of its people. Human rights activists such as Mr. Somphone deserve our support, and so should their efforts to improve Lao society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Repo. And now 1 minute for Madame Andrikiene.
Commissioner, Sombath Somphone, a prominent figure in social development and youth education, disappeared on the 15th of December in Vientiane. The government of the country confirmed the incident as recorded on the security cameras. and we are concerned that Sombath Somphone may be subjected to enforced disappearance, possibly related to his work. We express our deep concern about the safety and well-being of him. We call on Lao authorities to undertake prompt, transparent and thorough investigations in accordance with their obligations under international human rights law. And of course, we call on the EU High Representative to closely monitor the case. Finally, we recommend that the authorities of Laos should make enforced disappearance a criminal offence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And 2 minutes for Mr. Phil Benyon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The circumstances for Mr. Somphone's disappearance are really striking in that he disappeared in front of a police post and under the gaze of security cameras. My group, the Liberals and Democrats, share their fears, and fears that are shared by the United Nations and many international human rights organisations, that Sombath Somphone's disappearance is an enforced disappearance and almost certainly related to his work. We are deeply concerned over the lack of progress and information regarding investigations by the Lao authorities into the facts of his disappearance. It is absolutely crucial that the Lao authorities take all necessary steps to end the practice of arbitrary arrests and secret detention. It is also urgent that they make enforced disappearance a criminal offence. Enforced disappearances are not only a problem in Laos. We've had a number of cases come to us that have been the subject of urgencies across many countries. They are a clear violation of basic human rights and fundamental freedoms, the core values of the European Union.
Thank you very much. And now let me ask Mr. Migalski for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Madam Commissioner. Sombath Somphone is not even a politician, so his disappearance is not a result of his political activity, because that we could understand, not accept, but understand, if a political opponent was treated this way. He's a social activist, so his activity, the more so, should be supported by all of us and all political groups. And as I understand, this is a very special commitment, because supporting civic society is our task. We congratulate Laos with for its great economic activity. It's a greatly developing economy of the region, but Laos must also remember that a part of international cooperation is also respect for human rights and finding these who are responsible for such disappearances. I hope it will end well, and I hope the authorities of Laos will remember about this. Thank you.
And for 1 minute, the floor goes now to Madame Vergiat.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, President. Sombath Somphone disappeared on the 15th of December last year. His family and several NGOs have come to us and expressed their concerns. The video recordings indicated that perhaps the police authorities were involved in his disappearance. The Laotian authorities have said that this may have been due to personal conflict. If they want to be taken seriously, they cannot confine themselves to that kind of lapidary statement. They must mount a serious investigation into this, because there is clearly some connection to the police themselves. We must keep up pressure. Cathy Ashton's announcement is not sufficient. There seems that there are reasons for this, but the message we're getting is very strong on human rights. Mr. Somphone is an outstanding human rights activist. He has been fighting against confiscation of land from farmers because of mega projects financed by international authorities, including the EU. He is a source of annoyance to many people. Everything must be done now to make sure that he can be returned to his family. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of political groups, Mr. Posselt, EPP.
Mr. President, Mr. Somphone is one of the most outstanding people of his country, and this was a country that was once the most peaceful country in Asia, but since then it's ended up in a war. We've had 3 different princes, a communist, anti-communist, and so forth. It's been undermined by corruption, a dictatorship, and that's generated a crisis in the country. So today we've got post-communist or late communist structures in the country, and behind that there's predatory international capitalism, and a lot of criminals are involved there. So it's really very urgent for this case to be cleared up, because the country, Laos, needs people like Mr. Somphone to become a democracy, to find its way back to peace and reconciliation. Somphone isn't just a one-off human rights case. This is important for the whole future of Laos, and we're going to be focusing very carefully on this particular case. Thank you.
1 minute for Mr. Czarnecki. Mr. President, Madam Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, the situation of Laos is slightly similar to the situation in China, which we do not discuss because we have double standards in the EU. So we look more negatively at Laos because this is a small country with which we don't have too much trade, and we are more lenient toward China because it's a huge trade partner for many countries of the EU. And the situation is similar because both China and Laos are developing very dynamically in economic terms, but it's much worse with human rights. And here I would agree maybe with Mr. Migalski, who said that we could understand if a politician disappears, even though we do not accept it. But I would say that also when a politician disappears, we cannot understand this. But in the case of Mr. Somphone, we should emphasize very, very much that our relations with the authorities of Laos should be perceived through the relations with this person. Thank you very much. And now 1 minute for Mr. Scholz.
Mr. President, I want to stress very clearly the disappearance of Sombath Somphone is the most worrying example for the practice of arbitrary arrest by elements of the police. The world is watching this case very closely. I urge the government of Laos to do its utmost to find and release Sombath Somphone. I call on High Representative Lady Ashton to make it absolutely clear that the outcome of this case will be a benchmark for the rule of law in Laos, and that it will be crucial for the judgment on whether or not Laos qualifies for an enhancement of our relations, including trade relations. I welcome that our colleagues from the ASEAN parliaments have already endeavoured on a fact-finding mission to Laos, and I call on the ASEAN Human Rights Commission to establish immediately an inquiry committee to investigate the events surrounding the forced disappearance of Sombath Somphone. And finally, we will watch it closely in future, because Laos has to understand that we will make the rule of law and respect for human rights, as well as environmental and labour standards, a precondition for the further relations between us and them. Thank you.
Wcześniej było jeszcze pytanie w...
Earlier we also had a question to Mr. Czarnecki in the blue card. Do you accept the question? Of course.
Dziękuję bardzo za
Thank you very much for accepting this. I just wanted to ask you, because you mentioned my name, whether you fully understood what I said. I can understand something, but I do not accept it. I can understand that some evil things are going on in the world, such as disappearance of politicians, but I do not accept it. So I wonder whether you fully grasp this information. Thank you. To answer Mr. Migalski, well, yes, this information reached me, and this is how I understood his explanation, but I don't agree with him, because if an MEP, a representative of a European Parliament, says that we understand that a politician may disappear, even though we don't accept it, but we cannot understand that a social activist disappears, this is something very dangerous, something that may actually against his intention be conducive for the authorities of certain countries for politicians to disappear, but just to maintain the social activists. Thank you very much. Now we will continue with other speakers. The first is Mr.
Thank you very much, President. First of all, I would just like to welcome this clear and concise resolution. It's very good to have such a text of such high quality. And here there's a reference made really to a country that is trying to move away from the rural communism that it knew in the past towards a kind of commercial communism today. And as other colleagues have said, this is really a subject of concern. We're all concerned about the disappearance of Sombath Somphone. He was a defendant of agricultural workers and land rights and so on. And Anne-Sophie Gindroz, who defended the same cause, was actually deported from Laos just a few days before he was arrested, or before he disappeared. And I would ask the authorities to undertake a very transparent inquiry into this disappearance of Mr. Somphone. And I'd also like to say that regarding the UN and the United States, they have now sort of intervened, but ASEAN is also intervening, and I very much welcome that too. Thank you.
McAvey, 1 minute, please.
Thank you, President. For too long, the disappearance of human rights activists have plagued developing countries, and Sombath Somphone is no exception. We must take a more active role in investigating Mr. Somphone's abduction and make his case a priority in the 22nd session of the United Nations Human Rights Council. More pressure needs to be placed on Laotian authorities to aid in his safe return. Given the video footage, the government's response has so far been unacceptable. We all know the horrible prison conditions and corruption of the authoritarian states, and it is our responsibility as stewards of democracy and human rights to ensure Sombath Somphone is immediately returned to his family. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we are moving to catch the eye procedure, and there are 8 requests from floor. Let's start from Mr. Peter Šťastný. 1 minute for you.
Ďakujem, pán predseda, pani komisárka. Všetci odsudzujeme nečinnosť vlády Laosu v prípade zmiznutia uznávaného a
Thank you very much, Mr. President. When it comes to the Laotian government and their position vis-à-vis the disappearance of a human rights activist, Sombath Somphone, since his disappearance on the 15th of December 2012, the government has been on the receiving end of messages from the international community. They have not been able to give any information, and we must keep up the pressure to get transparency on the investigations. The government must immediately take robust steps in terms of that investigation, which flow from their obligations incumbent on them under international conventions. Thank you very much.
I'd like to ask to take the floor, Madam Jättenmäki.
Arvoisa puhemies.
Mr. President, these abductions along the lines of the one we're discussing at the moment have increased in recent years, and so the European Union, and particularly External Action Service, needs to consider what it can do to tackle this. I don't think there's sufficient cooperation in addressing issues such as these. We have an External Action Service in the European Union, and I think it would be possible to bring about better cooperation and to look into ways to address these abductions, to see why they happen and what we can do to stop them happening. Because an individual country is always going to be in difficulties. Now the problem is a lot of countries are countries which don't have an embassy, and it can be difficult to have contacts with the countries. So this is a very difficult situation, and I think more cooperation can only help.
And now, Madam Hibner. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, recently we have seen another case where the authorities of a given country are acting against people who are free thinkers. And this case of a great social activist, Sombath Somphone, in Laos is one of such cases. We should ask ourselves who this person was. He was not a politician, he was not an opposition activist. He was just working for the poor people of Laos. He was supporting the development of rural areas. He was helping to educate young leaders to take his place. And now he disappeared on the street. So we don't know actually nothing, because what reaches us is only little pieces of information. There have been witnesses, but police denies it. And knowing the situation in Laos, we can say that probably it was caused by authorities. It is good that the European Parliament takes care of such people, and that is also why I would like to ask the authorities of Laos, including the president, to start decisive actions and to explain the situation. Thank you very much. We have a question from Mr. Migalski. Will you answer the question? Yes. Okay, please go ahead. Thank you very much for accepting my question. You started your speech by accusing the government of Laos. And we are talking here that we want the government of Laos to solve this issue as soon as possible and to find this person. And on what basis, because it might be interesting for all of us, are you claiming at the beginning and at the end of your speech that government of Laos is somehow entwined here? Please do give your answer. Half a minute. In Laos, the situation is seemingly balanced and pro-human rights. There are situations in which people disappear without a trace, and this is only one of the cases where a person who was not a politician and was not harmful to anyone disappeared just because he was harmful to some authorities in the regions where he was active. And you can find this information in the internet. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Is Mr. Charles Tannock.
Thank you, President. The mysterious disappearance of Sombath Somphone, who is a well-known critic and dissident in Laos, is a deep tragedy indeed. And it's widely suspected that the security services or the police may be involved from the video footage, but proof, of course, is lacking. Laos was once a beautiful and peaceful monarchy, and now it's a one-party authoritarian communist state. So I welcome Lady Ashton's statement on behalf of the EU, and the Vientiane government now must be put on notice that the international community is aware of this tragic case and will keep the pressure up until his whereabouts are known and he is released. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo. A teraz bardzo proszę pan poseł Ziobro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ziobro. Mr. President, always with great concern and sadness we take information when we find out that someone has been kidnapped. But if a person disappears and the person is someone who is a social activist, someone who works for human rights, then our sadness is not enough. We need to react in a very energetic way. So I'm very satisfied with the fact that we are talking about this issue today. Also, this is a clear sign, but this is not enough. We have to increase our pressure towards the authorities of Laos to respect human rights and to find out what happened to this respected human rights activist, this person who was so much appreciated by his compatriots. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, President. Human rights are being breached in Laos, and the forced disappearance of Sombath Somphone is the most recent evidence of this. Through his work, he set up a model for rural development that would provide the security of supply for food for people in a very poor country. And 3/4 of people are living in rural areas in Laos, and the majority of people are actually working off the land. That's how they make their living. So work to combat hunger is extremely important, and I think the authorities should try as quickly as possible to identify the nature of the disappearance of this man and as urgently as possible ensure his freedom. In addition, it's very important that Laos now ratifies the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo. And
Thank you very much.
następny mówca jest pan poseł.
The next speaker, Mr. Cymański. I give you the floor.
Panie Przewodniczący.
Mr. President, we are not claiming that the reason for the disappearance were the actions of the authorities in this country, but the conditions concerning liberties and freedoms in this country somehow justify this sort of thinking. So this is a great shadow at the image of the whole country. So our actions of the European Parliament must be clear, because it is in the interest also of the authorities of Laos to explain the situation, to solve the situation. They have to prove that this kind of thinking is just a hypothesis and not a reality. We are lacking effectiveness, and the means that we have for the External Action Service should not be only used for representation and trade interest, but maybe mostly because of our mission to serve the freedom and human rights. They should be used for this purpose.
Here is Mr. Shin Kelly.
Thank you, President.
I too am concerned about the disappearance of Sombath Somphone, and particularly the way it occurred, stopped by the traffic police and then driven away by civilians on the 15th of December, which is almost 2 months ago. And while the government in Laos has denied any involvement, I think it is reasonable to state that we think that they could do more, at least to find him and return him to his family. The disappearance of Mr. Somphone, unfortunately, is not a once-off, as Mr. Posselt pointed out. It is symptomatic of what happens in many countries, unfortunately, where dissenters are invariably arrested, tortured and sometimes killed. So certainly we are right to highlight the case of Mr. Somphone here. He is renowned around the world for his work in trying to reduce poverty and to get fair land rights for small farmers, hardly criminal offences. And certainly the Laos authorities could help with the situation by declaring that the disappearance of people of this nature should be a criminal offence.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Franz Obermeier.
President, in Laos, great swathes of the country are leased to Vietnam and China without any reference to the farmers who live there. And this is because at the behest of the communist rulers. And Sombath Somphone has been acting in this area of rural development, and it appears he has now been abducted by the police. There had been a hesitant opening up in this communist state. However, this tells us that it continues to be a dictatorship which the EU subsidises to the tune of millions of euros. This kind of blatant breach of fundamental human rights, because of things like land grabs of this kind, must resurface in the negotiations with Laos, and they must be put on the agenda when we talk to them.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lisek, the last speaker.
Panie Przewodniczący.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Here we are dealing with two aspects of this case. The first is the personal drama of human rights activist Sombath Somphone, his family, people close to him. And we are calling High Representative to monitor this case and, of course, to intervene with Laos authorities so that as soon as possible the issue is solved and Sombath Somphone, a laureate of something that is called Asiatic Nobel Prize, Nobel Peace Prize, could come home. And the second aspect is a more general issue. The communist regime of Laos is still not tolerating its political opponents, people who talk about human rights, and it does not respect the basic human rights, freedom of expression, of knowledge, science, and rights of minorities. We should also talk about this, so I am very glad that we are dealing with this case. Thank you.
And now
thank you very much.
I ask Madam Commissioner Hedegaard to conclude the debate on behalf of...
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The Commission welcomes the adoption by Parliament of a resolution concerning Mr. Somphone. His situation is of great concern and has been since his disappearance in December last year. Mr. Somphone is a man of national but also international standing. He is, as we just heard, the recipient of the Raman Magsaysay Award, often referred to as the Asian Nobel Prize. He played a key role in organising the Asia-Europe People's Forum in the context of the 9th ASEM meeting last November. We share the concerns expressed in your resolution and will continue to work through all possible channels for his safe return. We do this by continuous interaction with the Lao authorities, strongly calling for stepping up the investigation. We are also in close contact with the many equally concerned countries in Asia, and the High Representative Vice President Ashton issued a statement on 21st of December expressing deep concern and urging the authorities to investigate this case. We have followed up with a démarche, and most recently in the context of the local human rights dialogue with Laos in Vientiane earlier this week on Monday. Following a recent visit, MPs from ASEAN countries have also expressed their deep concerns at the disappointing results of the investigation so far. With every day passing, our concern grows. Strong international mobilisation for Mr. Somphone is crucial, including at the UN level. So we call on the Lao authorities to involve the family of Mr. Somphone in the proceedings and to accelerate the investigation. We salute and join this Parliament resolution in favour of Mr. Somphone and the strong message of support and call for safe return to his family. To Mrs. Yetemeki, who referred to the need for a better cooperation, as far as I'm informed, our office on the spot are really reaching out to the other EU member states, but not only that, the démarche that I was just mentioning that was actually supported by the US, Japan, Switzerland and Singapore is just one example why there is rather big consciousness that it's important to cooperate, and of course also cooperate and have the same concerted message between our own member states. So in conclusion, the EU will continue to work with Laos, supporting its political, social and economic development and integration in the international community, but we very much do hope to see Mr. Somphone safe and free, and that very soon.
Thank you very much, and let me inform you that I have received 6 motions for the resolution to wind up this debate. The debate is now closed, and the vote will be after all debates on the 3 reports. Thank you, Madam Commissioner. Let me inform you, dear colleagues, that I have received 6 motions for resolutions to wind up this debate. The debate is now closed, and the vote will be after the debate. Let's come to the votes. We have three resolutions to be voted this afternoon. The first one is on Laos and the issue of Sombath Somphone. We have just one vote, and there is no roll call vote? Not on this report, so I'd like to ask you, who is in favour of a joint motion for the resolution? If it is adopted, the other motions for resolutions will be irrelevant. Who is in favour, please? Who is against? Abstention? Adopted.